Afternoon and welcome to today's Waterside Chat. I'm Tom Sadler. As Colin said, I'm the host, and I am delighted to welcome my very good friend, a serial entrepreneur, a man of great renown worldwide, and one of my great fun fishing buddies, Brian Bennett, owner, publisher, bon vivant of Moldy Chum. We'll be talking about a lot of things today. The American Fly Fishing Trade Association's Tomorrow's Fish campaign, climate change, steelhead, and the world of social media. Welcome, Brian.
Hello, Rangoon.
Hello, Rangoon.
Thanks for having me. Super stoked to be getting together with you, Tom. It's always a pleasure. And thanks for hosting on the network.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thanks for making the time, bud. So let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about Tomorrow's Fish campaign.
Sure. Yeah, I brought props.
Oh, there you go.
So I think the seeds for Tomorrow's Fish were kind of planted in an initiative we had during kind of the height of the pandemic, which was called Conservation from the Couch. And it was actually an idea that was that Lucas Bissett, who's the current executive director at AFTA, and our mutual friend Paul Moynister had kind of put together. And it was an opportunity, thanks to the wonders of Zoom technology, to get people together, anglers, advocates, NGOs, and to talk about certain fish species and habitats kind of regionally. So we did one for striped bass. We did a tarpon and bonefish. We did a Gulf redfish. We did steelhead. And what was really fascinating about that exercise was the connective threads across all the different species, habitats, anglers, and the major connective thread was the impact of climate change. So, there was a Blue Ribbon panel report that AFTA did. I think, that early on, the conservation from the couch. And
sorry, let me jump in. We'll put a copy of that or a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, the Blue Ribbon reports also, there was a link to it on the Tomorrow's Fish website as well. So they felt there was a need to get anglers active on climate policy. There's some really good groups out there doing a lot of work on, carbon neutrality and cleaning up supply chains. The folks at Emergent Strategies, the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, but we really felt there was a need for a forward-facing initiative around policy and climate change. And for lack of a better description, for those of you that are familiar with Protect Our Winners, kind of a Protect Our Winners concept for anglers is kind of a real simple way to put it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But what's the focus of the campaign right now? Where what is the action, the activity that you guys are working on?
Well, we just came off, and I think we're going to talk about this in a bit, the saltwater policy, the rework on that by NOAA. We just finished up organizing some comments through that process. Social awareness, doing some education, social media campaigns. The change in Congress has kind of thrown things into a little bit of a
sure.
And I'm not quite sure where we're going to go on the policy with that changeover. Lots to talk about there for sure. And coincidentally, we've got a strategy session here in Seattle, actually the next couple of days, where we're really going to kind of try to focus on kind of what our strategies are going to be for 23. But I can promise you there'll be, the goal will be to activate the angling community around policy. Tomorrow's Fish definitely has a marine kind of twang to it.
Mm-hmm. I like that twang.
We certainly work on, the freshwater component, as we used to say on Moldy Chum in the early days, everything flows downstream. We're certainly going to focus on the freshwater policy work too, as well. And, and it's a coalition. We've got a lot of friends in the industry, and, not only, the brand front, but also on the NGO front. So we think there's a real opportunity to kind of engage on the climate work.
Awesome. Well, obviously, the focus on climate, the getting the anglers educated to both the realities on the water, but in and up in the mountains, but also that it's more than, and I know we'll come back and talk a little bit about policy versus economic clout, but getting people engaged is critically important, and really appreciate the work that you guys have started to do.
Yeah, and if I could add too, I think, the debate about climate change, I think we can kind of begin to put that in the rearview mirror kind of officially. I know
Hopefully.
Angling Trade had a piece recently, where they did a survey, and the number one concern among the angling community, 80%, I think was the number, was the impact of climate on fisheries. And, we've been very, anglers must lead on climate change because we're the first people to really kind of see the impact in a lot of ways.
Yeah, as Dieter says, that's the guides and the anglers that are the boots on the ground or boots in the water or boats in the water that are seeing the changes. And, you and I have been through this long enough that it's been going on long enough that we really need to start stepping up our game. So let me step back because we're going to talk about stepping up your game in another realm. But I know you well, probably more too well, but our audience doesn't. So tell us the Brian Bennett story. How did you wind up sitting in front of a camera on Zoom with a fishing buddy and running Moldy Chum? And where did you start? Where did you grow up?
Wow. Yeah. How's the, I don't know the song, but A Long Strange Trip It's Been.
I think that's a Grateful Dead song, Brian.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So I have a friend, Skip Yowell. I should go grab it, but I have a poster hanging in my man closet where I keep all my fishing gear. And it was like, not so much that we survived those years, but that we actually remember them. It's a really good.
What were we talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So quickly, how kind of I got here. I grew up actually just outside of Boston in a town called Brookline. And for those of you that go way back, you may know that is the birthplace of John Kennedy. Matter of fact, with the home that he was born in is just a few miles from my parents' house. And Brookline, it was, those that of the Catholic persuasion had Jesus hanging over here and John Kennedy
there, for
right?
sure.
So I grew up in a family of Kennedy Democrats, which I wasn't really indoctrinated on as a kid, but certainly had an impact on kind of who I am today and kind of where my politics lie for what it's worth. But I went to social work school at Salem State College, which is now part of the UMass system. I wanted to give back to kids, and I was a competitive runner and became a bike racer and ended up in the outdoor industry, actually in the bike industry to start, and ended up actually going to work eventually in the outdoor space. Worked for a number of outdoor brands. I was an independent fishing rep. I became a sales guy and ended up at Patagonia and was there for almost 15 years, which really, taught me a lot about, at the time, Patagonia's mission was to use business, to find solutions to the environmental crisis. I think their new mission is we're in business now to save the planet. But I learned a lot there about advocacy and using, leveraging, economies and businesses, to benefit the environment. And kind of eventually moved on from there and bounced around a bit and kind of, was almost semi-retired and had the opportunity to connect, doing some work, did a hill walk. And, I always had this interest in the political world, in the advocacy world, spent some time, had some friends that, worked, went to the Kennedy School of Government. And I briefly touched in the political world on some campaign work. And, as a sales guy, there's a lot of similarities between politics and sales, right? Feature benefits, instead of trying to sell a product, a puffy jacket, you're trying to sell a policy or a candidate. So there's a lot of similarities there. So it's super interesting to me. I remember my first hill walk that I went on, I came away from that, really energized and felt like, I was making a difference. And fortunately, through the relationships that I've developed over the years with people like yourself and the trade with Moldy Chum, I was able to kind of go to work here and, this really meaningful work in terms of, leaving a legacy, especially I've got a young daughter who, concerned about, what kind of planet I'm going to leave her,
For sure.
So that's kind of the short story.
So social work to Moldy Chum. Tell us a little bit about Moldy Chum. Most people would look and say, what in the heck, what is, and it's not, it's not a magazine. You were an early mover in the online space, and now everybody's doing it, but you were there early with the podcasting. Remind me or talk about the podcast that you started.
The fish
sticks. That's right. Fish stick.
As in the Yiddish. Yes.
Yeah. The fish stick.
We did 99 episodes back in the day before podcasting was kind of a thing,
But that was like 10 years ago.
Oh, at least. It might even be more than that at this point. But
so
yeah, I like to say my left arm is Moldy and my right arm is Chum.
Chum, indeed.
So interestingly enough, prior to Moldy Chum, I had another online blog at the time called the Piton, which was an outdoor industry oriented kind of version. It was what the inspiration for Moldy Chum was. I wasn't an angler early on. Now it's been north of 20 years since I took up fishing, but I was not an angler. I'm kind of late adopter. And so my world was grounded in outdoor. So I had a website called the Piton. It doesn't really even exist. It doesn't exist on the web anymore. It was very similar.
Everything exists in the web.
But it was about outdoor industry. And so when I got into fishing, and the Piton got very serious. Like we had major readership. We got a cease and desist letter, and we decided it was time to shutter that thing up. I was like, hey, that I could take that same model and apply it to fly fishing. And I was really inspired by the Drake at the time, which was fairly new back then. We started in 2005 for reference. So there was no Instagram. There was really no Facebook. There was blogging was the thing. And I remember we would do what we called the bloggers ball at the IFTD show.
I remember that.
There'd be 3 people would show up, or 4 people. It was Moldy Chum. It was Marshall at Midcurrent.
Yep.
It was Lee Murdoch at Fly Fish Magazine and Tom Chandler from the Trout Underground. That was it. So yeah, early on, and we've always, the interesting thing was, as an angler, and we've heard this a lot, when you get into the sport, you automatically become more in tune with what's happening in the watershed and the environment. And I think it generally elevates people's interest in doing the good work to help that in that area. So that conservation was always one of the legs of the stool for Moldy Chum from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And so we're super proud of that. And I think that we helped inspire a lot of people as they came into the social media space to embrace the conservation messaging as part of what their brand was, in a way to keep their keep their readers engaged, and to be able to help support the groups out there that are doing the hard work, because it is hard work. And we're going to talk a bit about political power, versus the economy stuff. It's super valuable, and it's actually the most rewarding thing that we've done over the years. Now, from a social media standpoint, because we started early, we dominated in those years. We were running 500,000 unique page views a month back in those days. But now, with the advent of the growth of social media, our numbers are much more modest, but our engagement is much higher, like time-wise. I think that's because we are focusing more, we've kind of made people navigate where they have to kind of spend more time with us and click through and read. But also, I don't think there's a day that goes by that we don't have at least one conservation oriented post.
And you're putting content up daily. Sometimes
yeah, I
more
mean,
than-
it is pretty, I mean, I will say it is pretty remarkable. I could literally, it wouldn't even take me two hands to count how many days since 2005 we have not posted content. And back in the old days, it was 5 unique, posts a day. It was ongoing. It would update during the day. I've had various partners over the years as well, but generally it's been, 90% of it's been my work, and I still do it. And it's really a labor of love. I mean, it's never been, a place where I've never got, I've always had a real job to go along with it.
You haven't become
it's really
Jeff
nice
Bezos out of it, huh?
Yeah, no. And even there, I mean, it's like, oh, you're getting all these free trips. And yeah, no, I don't leverage that either very much. I mean, there's been some benefits in that
Sure.
respect in terms of, being able to get some gear to go on trips and helping people through social.
Well, and you've come and fished with me. I mean, what more benefit could you possibly want?
And yeah, I was trying to figure out, I was like talking to somebody, telling them I was going to be on the show today. And I was trying to remember how we even met. You probably remember.
I actually think it was back in the IFTD days.
Yeah,
and then
right.
I had called you, and I remember actually where I was, because I was in Tennessee, and I called you because I was trying to put together a group of outdoor communicators in the fishing space, and to do this whole thing of, let's build conservation awareness. And you didn't know me, and we talked for about 10 minutes, and you said, I'm all in. And it was you and Dieter and a few other guys who I kind of put together as a group of people, influence that I could call. And, what you were saying, and I think this is what's important in all of this, is that you created a platform to build awareness. And, people who go to Moldy Chum have a variety of things to be entertained by, sure. But they also can't avoid getting the educational part. And, I'll thank you publicly now for having shared a number of things that we've done over the last few years. So,
yeah, and it's interesting. I think, if you look at, major topics, some of them even still happening today. I mean, we'll talk about steelhead, I think, in a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is the petri dish of all of what's going on in the conservation world. I mean, it is literally like every single dynamic that we all face is relevant in the steelhead world. But the Thompson River is a classic example of it. Once probably the greatest run of wild steelhead, which is literally done. It's extinct at this point. But we were promoting that issue back in 2008, 2009. So, there's, I don't know, I can't recall the quote, but, they're making mistakes of, history. There's, if you were to go back through the archives and look at some of this stuff, and I even see it in Fly Fishing Magazine. I have old archives of all those, old issues from the early 70s. And you read these articles by the Ted Williams of the world and, Lanny Waller. And it's like the same issues we're dealing with today are like in the pages of the magazine 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well, and some people would throw in the towel and say, okay, I'm going to stop talking about that. And having, we obviously in a non-governmental organization like ours, our coalition group, the network is one platform, but having someone with your experience and a different platform has been tremendously helpful, I think.
Yeah, and there's some, there's a lot of really good work being done out there by some of the other, some of the social media guys. I mean, Friends of Fly Lords and Hatch Magazine and those guys. I mean, they're the kind of the new, especially like the guys like Fly Lords and the brands even. I mean, you look at the pull that they have in the social media space. less and less, I think, in the, the written word, the blog, so to speak. But you look at, the opportunity to get in front of, 300,000 people in a blog, Instagram post around a particular issue. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but I also think, there's also a, part of that where, when you're scrolling through, you see it's an impression, but generally you're rolling through it and you've forgotten about it 35 seconds after you looked at it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that, from a communicator's point of view, that, being able to grab those eyeballs and keep them engaged and having the content. And that, I think, is the important part of a lot of what, you're doing with Tomorrow's Fish and other programs.
Well, and there's a disconnect between, or a difference between, and there's a piece, there's actually a book, I know there's a book about it, which is political hobbyism versus political activism. And I think it's easy, there's a lot of folks, it's like, yeah, I show up at my local fly shop to the conservation group that's there, and I put $20 in the bucket and I get some raffle tickets to do something, and I sign a petition. And it's valuable, but ultimately that's not what I would consider activism, and
Sure.
So activism to me is, writing a letter in your own voice, picking up the phone, getting involved with groups, getting comments in, and helping move the meter on some of these topics. And we were talking about, I think we're going to talk about NOAA, saltwater recreational fishing policy. Let's just use an example. I recall in the second webinar, they were saying that, and I may be wrong, but if I recall, there's 200 million recreational saltwater fishing trips a year. 200 million. This comment period was open for people to weigh in on NOAA reworking the saltwater rec policy. As of that second webinar, they had 150 comments. Ridiculous. 150. So you look at that and you go, and we've heard this, so we all know this, those of us that work in the political world, a House rep gets 10 calls from constituents about a topic, and they're going, what's going on here?
Right.
So I think that, to tie that back to the Tomorrow's Fish thing, if we can get the angling community to activate around policy and climate and those things, it's not going to, we can help move the meter with modest engagement because it's important. And people will hear it from us. And I think we're seeing that. I know we're going to talk about, the summit, but, what I hear from veterans and being somewhat new to that process is that the conservation-minded community is being listened to more and more because they're organized and they're engaging more than they have in the past. So it's proof positive that kind of work can actually help move the meter.
Well, from the network's point of view, we have looked at the communications tool, and that's why I think having you on today is important for people to understand that getting it, throwing $10 or making your annual donation to pick your cause of choice is not, it's good. I don't want to take anything away from it, but it is, and you can send money to the network and we're delighted when you do it. But I'm much more excited when someone has read an article and said, gee, I want to take action on this. And whether it's write to their member, as you've said, or go to their elected representative or agency people and say, hey, this is important to me because of what I do and what it means to me. And having a platform like Moldy Chum banging that drum is terrific.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, is you have a responsibility, and we'll talk about this in a bit, but it's like, if you're using the resource, you have a responsibility to help protect it. My friend Sam Snyder, and this kind of links back to Moldy Chum. He wrote a blog post. I should forward it back to you. but Sam's he's a scholar when it comes to conservation and the history
Sure.
of conservation. And this was early on. And it was like, if you're not helping work to protect the resource, you need to get off the water. I mean, that's literally what it said.
So we'll put a link to that in the show notes, but let's expand on that for a second, because it's a really important kind of conversation. Is that personal responsibility to take care of what you and the resource.
Well, there's two things. I think we're jumping around a little bit in the schedule. We're using it. If you use, I do a lot of work for the Wild Steelhead Coalition. I was on the board for 10 years. I'm now their communications guy.
Right.
So it's kind of like the role I have in Tomorrow's Fish, where I'm really the guy kind of, taking a Moldy Chum model and applying it to the Tomorrow's Fish work. Same with the Wild Steelhead Coalition. And we were always trying to figure out a way to get this, like, for lack of a better term, the soccer mom to care about steelhead, right?
Sure.
To help drive awareness. And we finally realized we were going about it all wrong. Like, what we needed to do was get steelhead anglers to care about steelhead. I mean, they all do to some extent, but getting them active around that. And that's part of it. As a 21st century steelhead angler, you have a responsibility to help protect the resource, particularly with the condition of the resources in right now. So as I had mentioned earlier, steelhead's kind of the petri dish, I think, of a lot of fish conservation.
Mm-hmm.
That same rule applies across all species. If you fish for striped bass, you really should be helping protect striped bass. You should be submitting your comments through the new process, the Atlantic Fisheries Marine Group. You should be paying attention to all of that and lending your voice to that stuff. And the other piece of this, and I've been saying this a lot. So there's a lot of disagreement about fisheries management, it's particularly around specific species. And I'm not super fluent in this, but let's use, red snapper as an example. There's debates, among different interest groups around how they're counted, how they're managed, and all those things. But bottom line, if you fish for redfish, regardless of how you think they're being taken care of or managed or however, you should be investing in helping protect the resource. And I think the beauty of that is that that helps maybe break down some of the differences between the different constituent groups.
Expand on that for a second.
Well, I mean, I think, there's groups that want to see less, we want sustainable fisheries, where some folks are maybe more interested in putting fish in the cooler per se.
Right.
I think there's a bit of it's a bit of a misnomer that because I'm for example, a wild steelhead advocate, I wouldn't want to put a wild steelhead on the smoker. There's nothing I would like to do more than that, but we can't do that right now. So I think that coming to agreement around what I call maximum sustainable recreation is going to allow you to put more fish in the cooler, but you both should be agreeing that you need to have a sustainable resource. It needs to be managed properly. And ultimately, if enough folks agree upon all that stuff, then the extremists on both ends will be marginalized.
I really like that phrasing, maximal sustainable recreation. I mean, that's a great way to think about it, right? And it goes back to that. I love to fish, but if the fish are going to be adversely impacted, I have to think about that, right?
Yeah, and I also think the other piece is, this kind of ties back to the RAC conference as well. And again, I've been able to take this kind of concept or messaging back here. Like when I sit on a coastal steelhead, webinar, early on, you hear a lot of people, they trash the agency.
Right.
You guys don't know what you're doing, and you don't know how many fish there are, and I'm seeing plenty of fish. Like, you don't know. And again, you hear that across all the different angling disciplines, right?
Right.
So as an angler, you may not agree with the way things are managed, but you owe it to the resource to help the agency get the resources they need to be able to do the work that you don't think they're doing. And pardon my French, but it's like, if you really think the agency sucks, you should be putting the time in to help them suck less,
Right.
in your mind, right? So, I think that is, and I have heard, at least here, and I felt like I heard it at the Saltwater Rec Conference, a bit of a shift where people are saying, hey, what do we got to do to get you the resources that you need to be able to do the job?
Well, there's two important points there. And so we'll come to the Rec Summit in a second, because I'll use this to pivot to there. But that need to help the people who are responsible for doing the management, for doing this science, deserve our support for the resources to do it. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to agree with them, but we can agree that if they have the financial wherewithal to do the work that they need to do, then we're very likely to get a better result from the information. May not be the answer we want, but to be ignorant of it. So let's talk about the Rec Summit. This was the first one you've been to?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. And so you and I went together. What did you think? I mean, you're an really a newbie, if you will, to the whole policy, conservation, advocacy side of it in Washington, D.C. for NOAA fisheries. And then you've got this big room full of people. And, what was your impression?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, one is, it's really interesting, and this is kind of more overarching perhaps, but the fisheries management process, in the world of politics and policy, at least from what I can tell, is one of the most transparent there is across the government agencies. So that was number one. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I did hear, my biggest takeaway, I think we mentioned earlier, was, the people that were getting up and going, hey, what do we have to do, to help support the agencies, number one. And number two was the focus on climate as it related to every aspect of what's happening around policy and fisheries managed right now. I think that, my one, this is overarching, my one concern is that clearly the impact of climate and the rapidity and how fast it's happening. Yeah. Given kind of the whole scope of that event, like, management's got to be quicker, like that. It needs to be more responsive. And I think they realize that. It's huge. I mean, NOAA is a huge government agency, billions of dollars in funding. I mean, I think that this kind of ties to tomorrow's fish, is like, what do we need to do to be able to get climate as part of every single aspect, essentially, of fisheries management, and also the emerging uses. I mean, that was the other thing that came out of that conference, was the emerging uses that are happening in the marine environment. The two most notable are offshore wind and offshore aquaculture. Right. So, in the impacts there, and which is interesting, because offshore wind, like, hey, we all want to fight, we're all fighting climate change. Offshore wind is a way for us to help reduce our carbon input, but meanwhile, it's going to have an impact on our fisheries. Sure. So yeah, so it was a great event. There was some great networking there. That was the other piece of it, the opportunity to network. And I think one of the great takeaways was, obviously the full NOAA team was there. There was representation across the entire country. There were different voices in the room, for sure, which was good. But I feel like, the conservation-minded voices tended to be a little bit they were stronger in the room, I believe, than I think what historically may have been in the room in the past, from the people that I know had gone to multiple, conferences. But then there was recently there was an AFTA industry summit in Charleston, and
Mhm.
the entire NOAA team was there. I mean, Janet Coit was there, her whole
Right.
team, so that to me, I think was part of it, and encouraging to me to see that, the agency is really listening around some of these topics. And that was uplifting for me. And I came away from it super energized and was able to take some of those dynamics and apply them to the work that we're doing on the ground here. So that was the other piece. I mean, I assume that, a lot of the people that left that event were able to take some of the things they learned and were able to incorporate them into the work they're doing in their local communities,
Yeah. And it is, I could get this wrong, but I know I'm pretty sure that was either the 4th or the 5th summit. And it is, it has, I have seen the change, and I've been to every one of them. And it is interesting to see the evolution, but also see within the department, through changes of administration, continuing to put some focus on hearing from a user group. And it's, I mean, I don't want to break my arm patting ourselves on the back, but I mean, AFTA has worked on this stuff for a while, and the networks worked on it. And it's important to see the results of your work come to some fruition. And but from that, you guys, or you've helped.
Let me just interrupt real quick, Tom. The
Sure.
other thing too is, the Saltwater Recreational Policy Initiative came out
Right.
of that.
There's where I was going.
Right. So that's the big takeaway was that. So
what, tell folks about that.
So I think they wrote the last policy, right, was in 2015. And so because of the feedback at the conference around the issues of climate change and data collection and those kind of things, they're rewriting the policy. And they opened up a public comment period. It was the longest public comment period known to man. I can't remember when it opened, but it ran all the way up until the December 31st of 22. And so it was a really, they had 3 webinars. We put together, if you go to the Tomorrow's Fish website under the action, we've had a full page there with recommendations on comments that people were made, structured around the 4 areas that NOAA had kind of identified that what they were working on comments for. So that was really, we had done some work. Tomorrow's Fish had done some work on CEFI funding. That was very kind of much more behind the scenes. The saltwater rec policy was our first real kind of public facing, trying to get brands and build a coalition to get their comments in. I know that we've got a note into NOAA asking kind of where the numbers came in on the comments. So we'll have some details on that to see how much of an impact that we had. But we did pull together a brand letter in collaboration with the American Saltwater Guides Association. And we went out, I think we had 24 brands sign on to that and submitted it to the agency, a couple of days before the end of the comment period. So
Awesome.
That was that. And it was a, premium, and we had Patagonia signed on, Orvis. It's a who's who of, the fly fishing world. I would say, I would like to add one thing around the Tomorrow's Fish thing too. We're definitely, we talked about marine twang. We definitely have a fly fishing twang as well.
Yeah.
We certainly want to broaden that focus to incorporate, our conventional tackle friends as well. So
For sure.
I'm not, I've been known to throw some large saltwater plugs from time to time.
I think all of us have that skeleton in our closet, if you will, as fly fish. But you and I, and the world that we have operated in, and I like to at least feel like I can be authentic with that community, much less some of my other colleagues fishing colleagues who fish with a different style. I've I make a mess out of bait casters and spinning rods, so I stick with what I know. But it's it's a shared resource, and there is nothing, as you said earlier, and you know, there's nothing wrong with throwing some fish on the barbecue or the smoker when when the opportunity presents itself. But it's also the price of being able to do that is making sure that that resource is there and there's opportunity to do that.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, this is one of the points that I make frequently. I came out of the outdoor industry. I mean, I came out of the cycling world. You know, ultimately, I mean, I was basically a road guy. I mean, mountain biking really didn't even exist when I started getting into the sport. But, you know, mountain biking, rock climbing, you know, all of the above, alpine. And if you look at those activities, you know, you ride your mountain bike, you're not hurting the trail, so to speak. If it's, you know, you climb a rock, you're not affecting the rock. Fishing is the one thing in the world where like your enjoyment is dependent on another living thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is somewhat, you know, you think about that and you go, okay, you know, there's all kinds of, you know, potential moral issues for some people have around it for sure. But it's a different animal when it comes to, you know, bad pun for conservation around all of that stuff.
A moldy chum pun.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean,
yeah, right. You know,
yeah, for sure.
No, I think that's right. And that's, you know, without getting preachy about it, there is an obligation that says if you're going to enjoy the resource, if you're going to use the resource, then you need to step up and protect the resource or keep the resource available. And, you know, at our advanced age, it's really, we're looking down at your daughter and my granddaughter and saying, what kind of world do we want to live with them?
Yeah, and here's, you know, the thing is, you look at, I mean, there's, you know, you look at the competing business aspects of it, right? I mean, there's a lot of, you know, there's a large business community that wants to sell more boats and motors and fishing rods and lures. And I mean, the same applies in the fly fishing world, but you look at a lot of the news that's coming out, you know, around, you know, business projections and CEOs and all those kind of things. I mean, involvement in climate is going to be good for your business. Your customers, I mean, I think there's a, you know, obviously we're all familiar with this. There was a point when, you know, brands didn't want to talk about climate change because they didn't want to alienate the guys that didn't, gals that didn't think it was real. I think you can kind of put that, you can forget about that at this point. Like, it's good for your business because your customers recognize that it's an issue.
And I think you have done both from the Moldy Chum platform, but in you know, when you were at Patagonia, there are some leaders in the brand space who have stepped up and made it more comfortable. And by helping people see that happen, you know, sure, we all know about the New York Times ad, don't buy this jacket, but there has been a
how about don't make this jacket?
Yeah, don't make this jacket, right? But that's, you know, that's the next level. And, you know, you've been good, or Moldy Chum's been good about calling out some of that. And this is where, you know, tying it back to the work that you do and that I do is, you know, it's not enough to just say, I'm going to send $10 to, or I feel good because I'm buying these waders from Patagonia. I got to do more.
Exactly. And, you know, I think, you know, there's 145 million outdoor recreational users, right? 145 million of them.
Mm-hmm.
There's 5 million NRA members.
Right.
Let's use it as an analogy. Who's got more political power?
Right. And but why do they have it? Why do they
because
have
they've invested in it. They've
right.
invested in it. You know, it's a different, I mean, it's not apples to apples, obviously. And, you know, you look at the outdoor industry loves to promote the fact that they're an $850 billion concern. And that because they have all this economic might that they have a seat at the table. And I would argue that that's not the case. I think it's gotten better recently, but you look at the investments that are made. I mean, and again, it's not apples to apples. I mean, you look at the outdoor brand portfolio and like, you look at the biggest brand, what is it? Vanity Fair and the North Face and their group of brands, and it might be 5 billion, somewhere around there. The Koch brothers did 117 billion last year.
Right.
You know? So, and that's just those guys, they spent $700 million on a congressional election cycle.
Right.
So those kind of investments aren't going to be made out of the outdoor industry because the resources aren't there. And what I would characterize as the Army of Darkness has had a 40, 50-year head start,
Sure.
So what are those investments? I think those investments need to be made, but really where it's going to happen is through grassroots advocacy. And so that's why it's important. Our friend Paul, he coined used the term free rider. You got somebody working in Silicon Valley and they're making a pile of money and they've got the big SUV with the bike rack on the back and the skis on the front, and they got a place up in Tahoe and they go back and forth. And what do they give for conservation? What do they do for advocacy? Like those are there's a lot of folks that are taking advantage of the resource and aren't making investments to help preserve it long term.
And that's if I'm going to wrap us up, but if there's a takeaway here, it's that the communications campaign, Tomorrow's Fish, the communications campaign, Now or Never at Wild Steelhead, both of which are good examples of how do we talk to those people, free riders, enthusiasts, or people who are just sincerely interested and don't know, how do you do this? How can you do this? And that's, that's what I want folks who are listening to this, watching this, can come away and say, okay, you say what the problem is, where can we find the answers? And there are two places to look. Is that right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think, and there's others too. I mean, I think there's really good groups out there. I mentioned ASGA, American Saltwater Guides Association, Captains for Clean Water. I mean, you look at a lot of these folks that are, they come from the angling community and now are, have organized and are becoming politically powerful becoming important forces out there in that voice. You see much more of that than you have in the past. So whoever it is, I mean, that's one of the things at the Wild Steelhead Coalition. We put out a video with, it was kind of a take on the Visa ad, how much money you spent on certain things, but how much do you give for conservation? And so you look at, however you're going to invest, whether it's your time, your money, taking the, writing letters, doing whatever. But our point in the coalition was, we're not the only, we take the coalition part of our name seriously. Like, we'd love for you to give us money, but, if you need to find a group that's more aligned with you or closer to home or whatever that is, but is still doing the important work, you really owe it to yourself and to the community at large to help. That's what Now or Never has taught us in a big way.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the message, right? I think that's where we should. Let's wind up there. I'm gonna take us out with one. When are you coming? You're coming back here. You're gonna come and fish.
Yeah, a couple of times. I think I've got. We're talking about doing some. Some hill walk stuff. AFTA, I think, is they're doing another dealer summit in DC in April. So I'm actually probably going to be out a couple times. I'm looking forward to getting back, to the, pandemic's kind of put my annual striper camp on hold the last few years. And so I'm looking forward to getting back a couple times.
And how do folks get to Moldy Chum? Is it
moldychum@gmail.com?
Yep. moldychum@gmail.com and just moldychum.com.
Check us out. And even, Tomorrow's Fish too. Check us out on Instagram, on social. It's Tomorrow's Fish _org. There's somebody else had a Tomorrow's Fish Instagram.
So it's Tomorrow's Fish _org
on
Instagram. Yep.
Yep.
Awesome.
we've got a modest following right now, but we're hoping to build that up a little bit more. We're going to make some investments in that, and you can come to the website and you can sign up for a newsletter that we're actually, our first newsletter is going to go out at the end of this month, which will kind of keep people up to date on kind of current events around what's happening in climate. We did a post on Instagram today that was from the Fisheries Fund about cold water fisheries in Montana and the economic value, and it was a good one. So check it out if you can, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, B, thanks.
Yeah, you had
Really
one
appreciate
question on
it.
here you hadn't asked me yet, though.
Yeah, well, we could talk, you and I could talk for 3 hours as we usually do. So I'm gonna take us out and say thank you for doing this.
Yeah,
Hope
people enjoyed it. I don't see any questions in the chat.
Well,
oh, there it is. Is their contact info? Look at that. Yes, I'll type it out. Can I respond in the chat?
Yes.
Or does
it work?
I don't know. I'm gonna try it. And then I'll do there we go. And then I'll do tomorrow's fish.org.
Well, just in case, why don't you, because the recording won't have the
okay, gotcha.
Won't have the chat. Yeah, do you want to just say it?
Yeah, sure. Well, you can get a hold of me at moldychum@gmail.com.
Go slow. Go say it slowly.
Oh, sorry. You can get a hold of me at moldychum@gmail.com. And then tomorrow's fish is easy. It's tomorrowsfish.org is the website. Definitely check it out. I built it. What's really interesting is I've gone from being kind of a sales guy to a graphics guy, a web builder. And then we do have an Instagram. I think I mentioned it, but it's tomorrowsfish_org is our at Instagram. There's a fishmonger in Australia that had Tomorrow's Fish already.
Wow.
So
indeed. Well, Brian, thanks, brother.
Put another shrimp on the barbie.
I'd put another shrimp on the barbie.
Thank you so much. I loved it.
My pleasure, bro.
It's great. Look forward to sharing it with the Chum Nation as well.
And for folks listening who want to keep up to date on what we're doing at the network, you can go to our website and sign up for our email list, and you'll get all the latest news, plus notices when we have great guests like Brian Bennett from Moldy Chum. We're working on our next Waterside Chat for late February we may have a return engagement from our first guest, Miss Linda Benkin from Sitka, Alaska. So until next time, Brian, again, thanks, brother. We'll be talking soon.
My pleasure.
Colin,
thanks,
you can
everybody.
take us out.